welcome to From the Shed End, episode 88. Myself, TDOT. Theo, how you doing?
Not bad, thanks. For those who aren't aware, we're recording episode 88 for a second time. We had a bit of an audio issue on Monday, but as always, it's nice to do it it feels like a Friday because it's bank holiday tomorrow. We're going to say it's like a Friday feeling. I was just telling you offline that my finger's very, very swollen from my five-a-side football playing goalkeeper, but we got the win, so it's worth the swollen finger. But other than that, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Like yourself, I've calmed down after realizing on Tuesday morning that our audio had been corrupted. It wasn't working. So anyway, I think I've taken the video down now, but anyone who, I don't know why, but at least I think 70 people watched the video of just me talking and you being on mute, which is nice because it brings people to the channel. But yeah, apologies for that. We are back with another episode, repeating take 2 of episode 88. Before we get into that, please go and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the Linktree link in the description as well. It takes you to all our social accounts that we have up and running. You can also see them at the bottom of the screen as well. But Theo, where to start? Let's start with let's try and take away Monday. Let's clear our minds of what we talked about on Monday, and let's go back to Graham Potter, the sacking of Graham Potter. Initially, what was your thoughts? Was it the right call from the ownership?
Initially, I was a bit surprised by the timing of it. I felt we've got a couple months left of football. We've got the whole of April, which is a very busy April period. We've also got a couple of fixtures in May. So a good 2 months of football. So it feels like you might as well have waited until the end of the season. But like I said on Monday's recording, I felt maybe Julian Nagelsmann's availability accelerated that kind of sacking process. And there's a lot of kind of things that I think I read behind the scenes that happened. I think Hakim Ziyech starting against Tottenham apparently frustrated a lot of the players, given that he was one email away from signing for PSG on deadline day. Mason Mount not being involved in a match at all in the starting 11 or coming off the bench in the Aston Villa game, and he was the player who got the 2 goals in the reverse fixture back in October. And some of his kind of questionable lineup decisions as well, like we saw against Aston Villa, having both Reece James and Marc Cucurella in the back three as the centre backs when you've got Benoit Badiashile and Trevor Chalobah as options off the bench. It just didn't really make sense at all. So I think it's a lot of internal frustrations within the dressing room. I think it's also the timing and other managers becoming available. We know that now Leicester, Tottenham and Real Madrid are all looking for managers as well. So I think maybe we'd want to get those negotiations, whether that be Luis Enrique, Nagelsmann, starting now for the summer. But what I do want to say about the Graham Potter sacking is I think maybe it was the right decision. But that being said, I really wanted it to work. I would never really kind of openly put on Twitter Graham Potter out or anything like this because I was really desperate for it to work. I was willing to give him a whole time. I wanted to also give him a pre-season potentially, which he didn't have last at the start of last season. But I think now, given the timing of things, having invested so much money last summer and in January on new signings and still not seeing an improvement in results, I think maybe it was the right decision, especially maybe even it should have happened a month earlier, maybe mid-February after that Southampton game where we lost 1-0 at Stamford Bridge. I think the 3 wins against Leeds, Dortmund and Leicester maybe bought him a bit more time, but looking back, it should have happened a month or 2 ago.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because he's definitely someone for me that was out of his depth. And like you, I wanted it to work. I was very hesitant when someone comes in and they're not to say they're not proven, but they're not the profile that you potentially would expect to see of a Chelsea manager. And I get the direction that Todd Bowley and the ownership wanted to go down and try and just change things and go down a different angle as to, plan for the future, the long term. I get all that, but it was so hard, I think, and I said to you, probably November, maybe just before the lead up to the World Cup, it's hard to trust a process when there isn't one to trust or there's no vision to follow. And I think that was one of the key things for me, that just there wasn't anything to see from the games, the performances, the lineups, in-game management, tactical awareness. There was none of it to sort of say, right, we can kind of see what's happening. And, I know a lot of people said to us, Arteta's had time, look at what Arteta's doing. And you can actually see what he's doing. And that process has worked for Arsenal, seems to be working. We don't know if they're going to win the league yet, but it's so much different. There were so many things happening, the change of ownership, the fact we've got Graham Potter in first without the technical director and all these other people that were probably just as important as getting the manager right as well. So there was a lot of things that were going against Graham Potter. The fact the fans didn't want Tuchel sacked was a massive key thing. I don't think a lot of the fans got on board because of the Tuchel issue and the fact he went so abruptly as well. So I think he was always on the back foot, Graham Potter, but the results didn't help him. You look at that I think it was it January we scored one goal? We had one goal of the month.
February, Joao Felix against West Ham, wasn't it?
So it goes back to tell you how poor we were under Graham Potter. I think he's the worst manager we've had since the Premier League started in '92. Sad for him, but I mean, look, he's given it a shot. I think he realises the magnitude of difference in terms of what was potentially expected at Brighton as opposed to going to a big club like Chelsea. And it's a learning curve for him. I think he'll be back. I think he will definitely get another big job at some point in his career, but I just think this was too big of a bite to take for Graham Potter at the moment. But I mean, obviously, Graham Potter did do some good stuff. You think about the run that we went on initially. I think it was 10 games unbeaten. I think for under Graham Potter when he first came to the club. You look at the 2 performances against AC Milan. You look at the Dortmund performances as well. So there were good things to take from Graham Potter. Do you think it was probably? I know we said maybe the Southampton game, but did it make sense maybe just to give him till the end of the season? Do you reckon that was something that you would have liked to have seen? Maybe him just. I mean, we're going to talk about managers in a minute who potentially will take over, but maybe Graham Potter just give him the season to embed a bit more. Do you reckon that was an option?
I definitely would have given him until the end of the season. I think, like you, I think we wrote off this season maybe around November, December time. So we kind of accepted that we're not going to finish in any European position. We might as well write it off. And that being said, just give him until the end of the season and then assess the options in the summer. But then again, I think maybe Bowley and the squad kind of have a bit of hope on those 2 Madrid fixtures. And I think what they saw with the kind of style of management tactically and how he can manage the players emotionally as well just didn't really correspond with Graham Potter. And I think maybe the change was needed now. And we're going to speak about who's going to come in as the interim until the end of the season. But I think maybe they believe that person can steady the ship a bit more until that and kind of get the players together emotionally, have that kind of unity, Di Matteo style in that Champions League campaign and have a respectable finish for the fans until the end of the season. But like you said, I think his worst win percentage out of all the managers we've had in the last century at Chelsea Football Club with Graham Potter. And I think that's, sure, he was only there for 7 months, but that's just not acceptable, especially given how much money you've invested in the squad, how many senior players have still stayed from last season. So yeah, I think I would have given it until the end of the season, but I think this big decision would have had to be made there, so might as well let it happen now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've always said, stopped backing him or stopped believing in his process or the project or what he was trying to do very early on, and maybe that was in hindsight the wrong thing to do. But then if it's now, I mean, obviously it's coming out now that some of the players were very unhappy with certain things that were going on in the dressing room. The fact that there was that training issue that we spoke about on a previous episode around, players having to sit out of, training sessions and 9v9 rather than, what they would usually do. So there was a lot of unrest, I think. And obviously, you just mentioned there about Badia Shield and Trevor Chalobah hasn't featured. Obviously, Mason Mount's been out of the picture for a while now for obvious and probably sensible reasons, but with Graham Potter, I don't know, man. I think it's tough on him, but I do think the right call was made by the ownership. It was very out of the blue. I mean, I think you mentioned on the previous non-existent recording now, the post that I put up about being so happy about it, and it's probably the first time in a long time, unfortunately, that I've wanted to see a manager leave the club. You want to back the manager as much as possible at any club or a Chelsea manager, but when you can see things aren't working, I think Todd Bowley and the ownership had to make that call. They had to cut their losses, and in terms of the compensation, I know we spoke about it on here, but I mean, it does mean he's gone away with a lower compensation package because of the fact apparently we're in the bottom half of the table, so based on performances he only gets a proportion of that. So do you agree with that? Do you think he should be getting the compensation that he was due to get over that 4 or 5 year period, or do you think because now that clause clearly was in the contract to say that you're below the performance rate that we expect, you're going to get a cut of the compensation.
Yeah, I agree with whatever's in the contract, whatever's the contract says, and what's been signed back in September. That's what they agreed to. So, like you say, he's now in 11th after the defeat to Aston Villa, and I think maybe that means he's entitled to a smaller compensation package. But yeah, I think what's quite sad about the Graham Potter process is that we started to accept a bit of mediocrity under him, and that's not what we're used to as Chelsea fans. We're really not used to kind of just accepting a draw against West Ham or feeling happy of a point against, even some of the bigger fixtures we had against Liverpool and Anfield. We felt we were quite satisfied with a point, but looking back, the Chelsea under Tuchel, the Chelsea and the previous managers would have gone out for a win, and we would have been fighting for top four. So, like you, it's almost the first time I was almost happy with a managerial sacking, especially looking back at the last three, Tuchel, Lampard, and Conte. I think we were all quite upset with those ones. But yeah, I was relatively happy, but also a bit more excited to know who the next kind of name or candidate is going to be, because I think whoever's going to be is going to have a bit more experience and a bit more drive and hunger in their bellies to kind of strive for top four and get us some silverware, and where Chelsea deserve to be, and that's a top four club playing to win every single trophy in every single competition that they're playing in, and to get that trophy.
Yeah, no, it's right. It's good points made, and I think he'll get another job. I mean, we have to, it's not at the end of his career. It's not it's not the last job. It's not, it's not a Roy Hodgson. So I think he's, like you just said, Leicester, Tottenham, potentially West Ham will be coming up over the next couple of weeks and months. They'll be looking for appointments as well. There's also the England job. That was one of the things he was actually tipped for before he took the Chelsea job was, does he wait for Gareth Southgate at some point to step down as England manager and take on that role? So, he's a good manager, and I think he was heavily criticised. He was put in a really difficult position to manage a team that was going through transition, and I always said he should be the manager that comes in after that transition's done, when all the the players have been taken out of the club that need to, and the players that need to come in and have been brought in and have gelled together. He should be the manager then that takes that team on. But to do that, get results and transition the team was always going to be difficult. But what do you think about Bruno Solskjaer? Obviously, he's been 4 years with Graham Potter as a coach at Brighton and also at Chelsea. He's come in, had I think 48 hours with the club before, or the team before, having to then pick a team, go out into the dugout at Stamford Bridge and relatively put in a really good performance against a really poor and very heavily changed Liverpool squad. But what was your thoughts of Bruno, the team, the lineup, the free midfield, and obviously the performance against Liverpool?
Yeah, well, I used to know him as a player at Brighton. I think he was a bit of a legend at Brighton, and there's even a mural of him somewhere in the city of Brighton with his face on it. I think he retired maybe 2019 or around then, and he's been Graham Potter's assistant since then, and he came to Chelsea with him. What I've been quite impressed with is handling that transition period between Potter and taking over as the interim manager. I think he showed a lot of maturity in doing so. I don't think it's the type of person we should be looking at long term, though, given that he lacks kind of experience as a manager or a first team coach. But what you just said about that Liverpool performance, I thought it was a really good performance. We look the much better team. He played, I thought it was quite a brave decision, but it paid off. I thought Kovacic, Kante, and Enzo in midfield. It brought a lot of energy to our midfield, a lot of kind of bursts of pace from that midfield into the penalty box, especially with Kante coming back. But I think what I haven't been so much impressed with, but then again, it does make sense, is that he's still kind of praising Graham Potter's work at Chelsea. I think he said something along the lines of he did an amazing job. And he even said the boys gave everything after the game against Liverpool. Well, which you can't say. You just can't say. We haven't scored a goal. It's a 0-0. Sure, we played well, but just don't say the boys gave everything. If we won 3 or 4-0, we gave everything. Or if we came back from 3-0 down and scored 3 in the second half, we gave everything in those 45 minutes. But don't say that. Especially, I think he's aware that it's starting to upset the fans now. But yeah, I thought he did a solid job against Liverpool. But now maybe we're going to have the return of someone else on Saturday at the Molineux.
going to get onto that. I know you're dying to talk about dying to talk about that. But no, I thought it was a good performance. I thought we played really well. You always, Liverpool Chelsea games or Chelsea Liverpool games are always hyped up, and they're always, given the big, top level. This is going to be a brilliant game. Sky or BT always make it a big headliner, and it never always lives up to the expectation that I think the pre-match stuff always does. But there was obviously a lot of shockers for me in terms of the lineup for Liverpool. I thought Trent would start. I thought obviously Van Dijk, who was ill, would potentially start as well. Mo Salah. But you look at our team, and I was really impressed. I was impressed with how we started the game. The fact we just looked. There was almost a small bounce, not a big bounce, not a new lease of life or anything, but just something different. Maybe it was just. We talk about new manager bounce, but there was something different about the team. Maybe it's the fact we had three midfield with Enzo, Kante and Kovacic all in that midfield. We've got to talk about Kai Havertz and João Felix, who, for me, have to do better with their chances. And I get that they're not natural strikers, they're not natural number nines, but, both of them had really good chances. And obviously Kai Havertz had the ball in the back of the net, somehow uses his arm. Not sure why he uses his arm. Maybe the ball just comes to him at a speed. But Enzo Fernandez, Konate, offside. Give me your thoughts, because I'm sick of talking about VAR. But I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where the angle kind of looks a bit yes and no. It's obviously the line was drawn from a slight angle. I think potentially his toe or knee could have been offside, but that's just the technology nowadays. It really is the technology, and same with the Havertz one. I think it was a handball. I think given the speed at the pace that the ball came up towards him from his chest, and he didn't have time to properly lift his head, maybe it meant that his hand was just in that position. I think even you could tell from his celebrations, they were slightly muted, so he knew that Havertz, that goal might be chalked off. But yeah, I think I was at the stadium, so I just kind of presumed it was offside. I looked at the Sky Sports replays on YouTube. Angle is still a bit misleading. That's what I'm going to say. And there's always that. We saw it with Lukaku at Wembley last season. Same game against Liverpool, and angle really didn't do much favors to kind of really feel like the line's been drawn in a fair way. But yeah, I can echo what you said before about the Chelsea Liverpool fixtures. The last 4 times we played Liverpool 0-0 after 90 minutes. In all 4 of those fixtures. Sure, the cup finals were a lot more entertaining 0-0s, but I think the last 2 have been quite dire. And for me, that game against Liverpool was a team who simply can't put the ball in the back of the net in Chelsea against a team who just can't defend at the moment in Liverpool. And that was blatantly apparent with the number of chances we had. You spoke about Havertz and Felix needing to take their chances. Kovacic had 2 golden chances that you just feel like if there was any other player, if that was a Felix or a Havertz in those chances, they just bury them. You kind of maybe just say that Kovacic isn't a natural goal scorer, so maybe he gets away with it, but still that one-way one-on-one with Alisson, you've just got to put it on target. Just put it on target. I know Alisson had a very decent game, made some big saves, but just put it on target. You can't just sky the post from that chance. But yeah, like you said, promising performance, and I really hope we maybe continue that new manager bounce feel going into the weekend, and especially given that we've got Wednesday, we've got a trip to Madrid to look forward to, and I hope somehow we have a bit of energy and a new kind of feel around the training ground in Cobham to take with us to Spain.
Yeah, I think we will. We're going to get onto that shortly, but I want to talk about Kai Havertz really quickly because I put out a tweet this morning around since he signed for Chelsea and the stats. And I looked at the stats and I thought, I actually feel sorry for Kai Havertz. I know he gets a lot of criticism. He gets a lot of stick from the fans and from pundits as well. But, I mean, he's not a natural number 9. He's not a striker. He should be playing as a central attacking midfielder or, as one of those that sits behind a striker. And I just look at his stats, the first season, 4 goals. Went up, increased it to in the 21-22 season. He scored 8 goals with 3 assists. This season so far, 7 goals, 1 assist. So there hasn't really been any real progress. I mean, you talk about what are you expecting from him. Me personally, I would like to see those assist stats. 3, 3, and a 1 for this season. I'd like to see them, double, maybe triple in some sense. But the goals I'm not too fussed about because I don't expect him to be a natural goal scorer. I don't want him to be the guy that we're relying on as a number 9 to score goals. But I do feel sorry for him. He's not being played in his natural position. Hopefully we resolve that next season. But do you feel that is harsh criticism to Havertz at times when, obviously his confidence is low, but he's not necessarily a striker. He's not someone that we should be relying on to score our goals.
I think the way he plays makes it quite apparent that he is not a striker. He always seems to drift on the wing, or he never penetrates into the penalty box. And that's why I kind of expect his assist numbers to be higher, given that he sometimes puts, he allows Felix or whoever else it is, Pulisic Mount, to kind of be that kind of centre forward or striker. So I would expect his assist numbers to be higher. But like you said, I think it is slightly harsh given that he is not a natural number 9. And I think the best of Havertz we saw since his time at Chelsea was when we played alongside Lukaku as that kind of player that sat behind him or alongside him. I think it was that game at the Emirates where Havertz and Lukaku might have started together. And that was one of the best attacking displays I think I've seen in the last season or two. So yeah, it is slightly harsh. And I do feel like whether that be Osimhen, Ivan Toney, or even Nkuku, if we decide to play him as a striker, they can solve this problem and put less pressure as well on Kai Havertz to get us the goals.
Yeah, no, I agree. Really quickly, before we move on, I think we have to talk about Wesley Fofana, N'Golo Kante, Enzo Fernandez. All three, for me, deserved man of the match. I think Enzo Fernandez ended up with it, but what a performance from Kante. Someone who we've clearly missed all season, was literally everywhere, didn't stop running till he was subbed off, but what a performance from him. And Wesley Fofana as well. I have to credit him for his defensive duties.
Yeah, all three of those players for me, man of the match nominees. And I think even 10 minutes into the game, I just got my phone out and texted you and said, "Isn't Kante meant to be fasting?" Given how good he was. But yeah, just brought so much energy. He was everywhere. I think there was a moment, it might have been, I think Henderson or whoever was Simicast thought they had the ball like covered and it was going for a Liverpool throw-in, and out of nowhere Kante just comes and puts in a tackle to get the ball back in play. So yeah, brilliant player, and I think it was quite sensible to bring him off. I think it was after 60 or 65 minutes. Manage his minutes, wrap him up in cotton wool, keep him ready for the Molineux game, and also have him ready for next Wednesday as well. Yeah,
I agree. I think we do. So I know, he's got through. I think 30 minutes Villa, 60 minutes against Liverpool, and we still have to manage his minutes. He's been out for a long time, but can't wait to see him against Real Madrid, who scored 4 against Barcelona in the Copa del Rey yesterday. But we still have hope. We're going to get onto that, why we've got hope shortly. I keep saying that. But Wesley Fofana, just quickly, really last ditch. I think they were coming who took the shot on for Liverpool, but it was going in. Kepa would have seen it very late, and Fofana almost a millimetre of his forehead onto the ball, and saved us from going 1-0 down. So very impressive with him. I hope that continues. I think we spoke about it on here already. We've got hopefully a really good defender in Wesley Fofana, so hopefully that continues. But let's move on. Let's talk about the stuff that you've been dying to talk about. Let's go back, because I want to try and do this in a timeline way as opposed to just get where we are current time at the moment. But obviously Graham Potter sat, I think, on Sunday evening. We get the news that Julian, Nagelsmann, Luis Enrique, the 2 front runners, with Maurizio Pochettino as an almost considered candidate as well. Nagelsmann, I think, has had numerous conversations via virtually via, I don't know, Zoom or whatever Chelsea decide to use. I think Luis Enrique flew in to London maybe yesterday and flew back to Spain last night to have talks with Todd Boehly. But then out of nowhere last night, The Athletic, David Ornstein reports that Frank Lampard, out of nowhere, has decided he wants to give it another shot. Todd Boehly's willing to give him another shot at being an interim head coach of Chelsea, out of nowhere. I mean, try and dissect that for me. What's your thoughts on obviously Luis Enrique, Julian Nagelsmann, and obviously Frank Lampard coming in as an interim for the next couple of games, 9 or 10 games left of the season?
Yeah, I think like you quite sensibly said it on Monday's non-existent episode now that I think Nagelsmann and Enrique are 2 managers that would want to maybe come in the summer, bring in their players, assess things properly, have a pre-season with the players, rather than them come in, beginning of April at a crazy part of the season where they don't really know what, the chemistry around a team. And I think Nagelsmann they're both very good people, but we need to take our time and assess which one would be the better, the most suited to the club. I know that the board have been very impressed with Luis Enrique's ability to speak English, and apparently he is very, very keen on coming to the Premier League. He's made that known for the last couple seasons or so. And I watched a Sky Sports video with Graham Hunter, who's a La Liga Spanish football expert, and he was kind of assessing, the type of manager he is. And apparently he's the type of person that if you really, really want him, you've got to put all your eggs in one basket to get him. So maybe the fact that we're also talking to Nagelsmann at the same time as him might put him off slightly. That being said, like you just mentioned, he flew to London for the day yesterday, probably had what seemed like promising talks with Chelsea. I think I mentioned it to you as well. He's the type of guy apparently that has his Twitch channel and records himself giving post-match thoughts. So similarly to Bowley, he might be quite interactive with the fans, which is good to see. Nagelsmann, on the other hand, is a very young manager, slightly less inexperienced. Started managing in 2016 with Hoffenheim before going to Leipzig, then eventually Bayern Munich. A very smart guy, clearly won every single one of his Champions League games. And I thought the Bayern Munich's sacking was quite harsh on him. But I think maybe it was more because Tuchel became available and they thought it was now or never. A manager who's very capable as well of switching his tactics mid-game to kind of manage the situation strategically, but also emotionally with the players, which is something we need to see. We didn't see enough of with Graham Potter as well. But what does worry me is I also read that he couldn't get the best out of some of the bigger players at Bayern Munich, the likes of Gnabry and Sane. So maybe that's something to consider too. And then, like you just said, out of nowhere yesterday, the news comes out that Frank Lampard is now going to take charge as our interim until the end of the season, which I was honestly so surprised. I know that he was at Stamford Bridge for the game against Liverpool, but I just thought he was there as a spectator. But now looking back, it probably means that he was there, as the next manager of Chelsea Football Club. We did say, I think, after his sacking that he'd be back. He'd be back in the future in some kind of capacity. But I don't think we ever expected it to be 2 years now, just over 2 years afterwards. Yeah. It is a bit of a step down. He went from managing Chelsea on a full-time basis to going to Everton on a full-time basis as well. And now he's an interim coach. But I think that's what he has to do again. He needs to put himself in the shop window, prove that he is still a very capable manager, go on a good Champions League run as well, which is what we need for the end of the season. And then maybe look at what options are available to him in the summer, potentially Leicester, potentially West Ham. But I don't think it would be sensible to hire him full-time. We need to maybe learn from our mistakes in the past doing that. And I know that you're going to say, what if he wins as the Champions League? You've got to give it to him full-time. But I still think if he wins as the Champions League, we still need to focus on Nagelsmann or Luis Enrique. And I think there's a third name that got mentioned today, Ruben Amorim, who's the Sporting Lisbon coach. And apparently this guy is considered a god among Sporting fans. They hadn't won the Liga NOS in decades, and then he won it last season or the season before. And I think they'd be very upset if he were to leave Sporting Lisbon. So that's another name, potentially the new Mourinho in Portugal. But yeah, I think the front runners for the next season would be Luis Enrique and Nagelsmann.
Yeah, it's. I did say that. I did say, what if he wins the Champions League? But I have sat down and thought about that, so I've got an answer for that one now. But I agree with you 100%. I think Luis Enrique, for me, I read last night that when he met with Todd Bowley, he had like a presentation pack, a very detailed presentation pack of what he kind of wants to bring to the club, and also his expectations and vice versa. And I think it shows the willingness, being keen to try and get the job. It hasn't just come with the idea that he's one of the front runners, so he doesn't need to almost sell himself to Todd Bowley. I think he's decided that he wants this job. He wants to get back into football as soon as possible. And for me, I think you look at the two CVs, and I think we spoke about this on Monday, but Nagelsmann very early into his managerial career, 35 years of age. I think he did win the Bundesliga and maybe the Super Cup, I think, or the German Super Cup, I think.
Pokal Cup.
Yeah. So he's won that. But then you look at Luis Enrique, who's 2 times La Liga. I think he's won the Champions League. He's won the Club World Cup. He's won it all. Very experienced in dealing with a very various range of players, youngsters, and the top level, harder, difficult potentially players to keep happy and pleased in a very large squad as well. And I think he would be the one for me that I would go with long term. I think Nagelsmann, a very good manager. I love him tactically. I love what he does. I love what he's been doing at Bayern Munich as well. I'm very similar to you. I was very shocked that he got sacked for, I think Bayern Munich, if not at the top of the Bundesliga, I think they're a couple of points off second place. So, to sack him there was strange. They're still in the Champions League as well. But like you said, Thomas Tuchel, a world-class manager, let's be honest, was available. And they went with the experienced man in the end. So I think either or. I think the fact that Frank Lampard's coming in as an interim, I think that would be, makes perfect sense to an extent. I think, gets the fans back on board. Obviously we know there's been a lot of unrest with the fans over the last 12 months, let's be honest, since Roman left. Get the fans back on board, get a familiar face there, someone that the crowd loves. Potentially, Ashley Cole's due to be part of the coaching staff. I think Paul Clements as well is included in that, and also potentially John Terry coming into that fold. We both read and saw that almost cryptic post that John Terry put out the day before the announcement of Frank Lampard, or expected announcement of Frank Lampard as interim head coach. Maybe he knows something we don't know, but I just think for the interim, it's a perfect fit for Frank Lampard. It gives him the opportunity to, like you said, put himself in the shop window. My only worry is, and I will say this, is if we don't sort out a long-term option, whether that's Enrique, Nagelsmann, whoever, my only worry is, and if Frank Lampard does, which he could get us to the Champions League, let's be honest, we could get to the final just by sheer momentum of the fact that Frank Lampard's here, the fans are back on board. If we do that, we win the Champions League. We don't have a long-term fit for the job. We don't have someone in place. How do you sack someone who's just, I know we've done it before, Roberto Di Matteo, but how do you sack a club legend? Not to say Di Matteo wasn't, but how do you sack Frank Lampard after winning the Champions League? I don't know I don't know. Can you do that? Would you do that?
I think I'm trying to remember, because I think AC Milan had a similar situation where they were meant to have Ralf Rangnick as their future manager, and they had Pioli as an interim, and he was doing so well, Pioli, that they told Rangnick, actually, sorry, no, it's not happening anymore. We're keeping Stefano Pioli. Yep. But no, I think the fact that both of them supposedly had talks with Chelsea yesterday shows that we're trying to get it done early. And I actually even expect us to make some kind of announcement about it end of April, beginning of May, similarly to how we announced Conte, I think April time for the start of next season. But yeah, I think Frank Lampard just needs to be aware that this is a 2-month thing. Even if you win the Champions League, I don't think there's going to be any chance of him getting the job on a permanent basis. But I can echo what you said. I think I've been going to every single game at Stamford Bridge almost this season, and the atmosphere has been a bit off. It's been slightly toxic. Even on Instagram, Twitter, it's a lot of, it was a lot of not nice messages towards Potter, or a lot of criticism to the players and the squad. And I think Lampard will solve that. He'll kind of unite the fans. It'll be a lot more pleasant. It'll be a lot more, I think, as well. Something I've noticed, it hasn't been very vocal at Stamford Bridge. I think there'll be a lot more chants hopefully going on at the Bridge. It's definitely what we need. It's kind of bring back the feel-good vibes, I hope, as well at Stamford Bridge. But I'm still shocked that, when we sacked Lampard after, I think that was that Luton game in FA Cup in January 2021, I never thought I'd see him again wearing a Chelsea tracksuit anytime soon. It feels almost surreal, like a bit of a pinch me moment when I saw those Fabrizio Romano posts yesterday. But again, I think players like Mason Mount, players like Aubameyang potentially as well, players who have been kind of frozen out of the team, that it could be a new chance for them. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform. You do wonder what this means for Mount's future if he has 2 amazing months of football now and he's brought back into the fold. Do you give him a new contract? Do you give him the money he wants? Does he believe in the Chelsea project again? Does Enrique and Nagelsmann come in the summer and say, I want you as my midfielder next season? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. But I think the main word I can say is excitement right now.
Yeah, I think you echo a lot of Chelsea fans, and me included. I think we are, some people have said it's a lose-lose. I think it's a win-win. You know, you get someone who knows the club inside and out, understands what the club's about as well, and if it is just on an interim basis, it does give what we've all asked the board to do, is make sure the next long-term manager is the right one. So I don't think, you know, people say, why not just go get Enrique or Nagelsmann now? I don't think that's, I don't, if they're not available and they want to have a couple of months up, I think that is the right approach to take. My only question is, would it have made any difference keeping Graham Potter in charge? Would it have made any difference to keep Bruno in charge? Probably not, because, you know, nothing really to play for bar the Champions League. There's nothing to say Frank Lampard will come in and, you know, galvanise the team, and the team will just suddenly start playing amazing football and scoring 6 goals a game. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think just a familiar face, a change of approach might actually help us. It might actually make us think differently tactically. We might change things. I do agree with you, Mason Mount. I think obviously we knew that. We know Frank Lampard loves Mason Mount. He's in literally every game possible. I think I said on a video last night that I think he made him captain after the FA Cup game before he second last time as well. So it's a tough one, Mason, because I think he wants to stay at the club. I think he wants, you know, the money, I don't think is the issue. I think it's just the length. I don't think he wants his 8-year deal. So maybe Frank Lampard coming in, maybe gives us a slight reassurance. Maybe the fact, you know, Luis Enrique, like you said, maybe or Nagelsmann, whoever, might want him to stay. Maybe this means that we don't keep João Felix and Mason Mount comes back into the fold. I think that has a massive factor on that, because if we do keep Felix, I think it almost spells the end for one of those players, maybe Mason Mount or someone else. So it is going to be difficult, but I'm very, 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 very excited for the very first time in a long time as a Chelsea fan to see an interim manager come in. You know, Frank Lampard, legend. So, you know, you couldn't put the smile on my face yesterday or today. I think this is one of those ones where I don't care what anyone's criticism is or anyone thinks, non-Chelsea fans think, I don't care. You know, this is someone that we probably do need in the club at the moment to just balance and steady the ship, in my opinion.
And our expectations aren't that high. Let's be honest. We're out of the top 4. You know, we're not going to get top 4. I think in the Champions League, it's almost like we're joking about how we're going to win it, but if we can go on a good run, then let it be. But I think it's more just kind of bringing the players back together and taking that into the summer and next season with the upcoming manager. So I think that's what Frank Lampard needs to do. And also, like I said, bring back that kind of unity amongst the fans and the players and the team. I think he's the perfect man to do that. He's a club legend. Even though he was at Everton, the Chelsea fans loved him and still wanted almost Everton to do well at times, given Frank Lampard was in charge. So I think that's what he needs to focus on. And also stopping all these kind of like whatever happened behind the scenes in the dressing room, players falling out, etc. I think Lampard is the type of manager that can prevent that. I think Azpilicueta, Thiago Silva, players that absolutely adored, I think, working under Frank Lampard. I think Silva put a really emotional post about Lampard, thanking him how he's the one who brought him to the club and how he's so grateful because that's the reason he won the Champions League. So I think that you have a really good bond and rapport with the players that were there back in 2020 and 2021 as well. So yeah, I think that's what I want to see now for the next 2 months.
Yeah. I'm excited, and as we're recording, hopefully the announcement comes very soon. You'd expect him to be announced maybe today. Take training tomorrow. So we've got a big game. We're going to talk about. Keep saying big game, but we've got a game on Saturday against Wolverhampton Wanderers. So you'd expect him to be in place for that. Maybe get a training session before then as well tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, it's a no-brainer to get someone in that the fans love, the fans will love. After Graham Potter, I think they had to do something. The ownership, they had to do something that was going to be right for the fans, right for the club. And like you said, this is not a situation for Frank Lampard where even if he loses 6 out of the remaining games, I don't think anyone's going to be too fussed if it is just on an interim basis. I think if we get knocked out against Real Madrid, I don't think the fans will be too fussed. I just think they probably want to just, I'm talking for myself, I just want to see some good football again. And you think back to some of those early days with Frank Lampard, there was actually some good football, and I know it fizzled out in the end, but there was some really good football being played by Frank Lampard. And now he's got better players. You think the first time around the transfer ban, and we brought in Timo Werner, it didn't really work. Kai Havertz, who we've just spoken about, and I think Hakim Ziyech came along with those players as well. So this is a whole different ball game for him. He's got quality in depth now, slightly to an extent. You know, he's got Mudryk, he's got Sterling, he's got Madueke, Enzo Fernandez, Kante's back from injury, Reece James Chilwell obviously developed since he's gone as well. So there's enough for him to take from this, and you can't hurt his CV unless he really does. You know, we lose 10-0 every game. I can't really see that happening. But let's move on to Saturday. It does feel like a Friday, but let's move on to Saturday's game. Wolverhampton Wanderers, a team that I really, really hate playing, especially away with Molyneux on Saturday, 3 o'clock. I'm not sure I hate them, but they're just a team that I feel I have checked out our past results, but I'm sure we tend to struggle, especially at Molyneux. What's your thoughts on Wolves?
Yeah, they've had a bit of an inconsistent season. Started off with Bruno Lage, and then they fired him for Julian Lopetegui, who's kind of been up and down. I still think there's a lot of quality in that squad. You look at Adam Traore, you look at Ruben Neves, who's fortunately suspended, I think, for Saturday. Daniel Podence as well, who should be suspended. I think there's a video of him spitting at one of the Forest players. I don't know how VAR didn't give him a red card for that. Good quality in that squad. I think, like you said, it's a team I don't like playing, especially away from home. Molyneux. I think last time we won there was when Frank Lampard was in charge. That famous 5-2 victory when Tammy got a hat-trick, Mason Mount and Tomori scored the other two. A very tricky ground to play. I feel like it's the type of team, like, given they tend to kind of show up against us. I know we comfortably won 3-0 in the reverse fixture at Stamford Bridge back in October, but I think it's going to be a different type of game on Saturday. I think in terms of lineup, I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see what Lampard does on match day, whether he brings Mount back in the team, whether he sticks to that team that played quite fairly well against Liverpool with Kovacic, Kante and Enzo in midfield, whether you rest Kante even and, you know, consider him for Wednesday's game against Madrid. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made by Frank. There's also the kind of questionable ones where it's like, will Ziyech or Aubameyang be on the bench? Players that, you know, have been frozen out lately to a new manager, clean slate. Are they brought back into the fold? But yeah, I'm expecting a tough game, a really tough game. I don't think things will just happen in a click of fingers like that. I wouldn't be surprised even if we lose or potentially draw it. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting fixture. That's for sure. Kind of gutted I didn't get a ticket for it now that it's Frank Lampard's famous second return in a way.
I'll put it to you like this. I don't think they'll be going for face value tomorrow or Saturday. I think they'll be rocketing through the ceiling in terms of prices for tickets for Saturday. But I agree it's going to be a tough game. I think, obviously we've spoke about this season so much on here. And I do think it's a difficult game because of, again, you know, another manager change. You expect that bounce to continue after the sacking on Sunday, but you know, Wolves are a difficult team to go against. And like you said, I think 2019, 5-2 is our last recorded victory there in the league. It is going to be a really difficult game. If Mount does come back into the team, it's going to be interesting who comes out of the team. I think that's what I'm more, not worried about, but I'm definitely going to have my eyes on that area of the team, because I think Mount will come back into that team. I think maybe Trevor Chalobah might feature as well somewhere. Do you rest some of your key players? You'd expect Badiashile, who's not involved in the game midweek against Real Madrid, to potentially play on Saturday. Do you rest Koulibaly, who you're going to need in that game? So there's a lot of questions there for we're saying Frank Lampard, but whoever's in charge for that game. I think it will be a tough game, but this season for me now isn't about climbing up the table. I mean, I think we move back into 10th if we win and results go our way. We can move back into 10th. We can move back into the top half of the table. But, off the off chance, we could still, it's not out of the question, but we could still get Europa Conference League football this season, which, there's pros and cons to that. But, I just want to see some good football on Saturday. I want to see a good performance. It'd be interesting if Aubameyang or David Datro Fofana is given an opportunity. Yeah. Someone that I've spoken about so much on here, and I know you have as well. But we need a goal scorer. We need someone that can score goals, whether it's 1 or 2 goals. this is an opportunity for Frank Lampard just to showcase that he's not just a one trick pony. You know, he hasn't just come in and, you know, he's got ideas, and it obviously didn't work at Everton. It worked slightly at Derby with the loanees that he had, and you know, he done really well. That transfer ban still got top four when he couldn't sign any players. So I think he's got it in him to do something for the next, you know, remainder 2 months of the season. But it is going to be tricky against Wolves. I'm wondering about Diego Costa. Actually,
I was about to say, we know he's scoring for Wolves.
Yeah, you'd assume he potentially will feature at some point in the game.
Because he hasn't scored a single goal all season, but he's playing Chelsea, his former club. We know what former players do against us. Yeah. And when you said, you know, we don't have a goal scorer, he was our last 20 goal a season goal scorer. So it would just be typical for him to pop up on Saturday with a header or something and get a goal. But either way, I think Chelsea fans will love seeing Costa back on the pitch, and I think
not if he scores.
Not if he scores. That's true. Yeah, I think he played a part in that kind of moment that led to Podence spitting in one of the Forest players' faces. So I think he is fit to play. But yeah, hopefully he doesn't find his shooting boots on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I agree. Before we wrap up, let's do our predictions. You go first.
I'm going to go with what kind of we've seen with away trips at Molineux recently, which I think has been draws. I think we drew 0-0 there last season.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that new manager bounce might give us a goal. I'm going to go with 1-1.
1-1. Okay, I'd take a 1-1. I'm going to go 2-0 Chelsea. I think the bounce will be good. I think it depends who starts. More interested in terms of, you know, is it Mudryk or is it going to be Raheem Sterling or, you know, João Felix on the other side, or whoever starts, Madueke potentially, we don't know. So I think those areas for me are key, and the midfield. But I think we have enough in that team, and I'm hoping it is Frank Lampard that's in the dugout. So if it is, you expect those players to want to try and fight for Frank Lampard and put on a good performance for him as well. And the fans, you know, the travelling fans and all the fans as well. So I'm going to go 2-0 Chelsea.
Interesting. Hopefully you're right.
I haven't been all season. I think I got one right this season. So yeah, let's hope I'm right. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I mean, you're going to the Bernabeu on Tuesday. You're travelling Tuesday, Wednesday?
Travelling Wednesday morning. So hopefully we'll have to squeeze in a recording on Monday or Tuesday, hopefully to share my pre-match nerves and my travel plans, which I think I mentioned before. If not, we'll do one at end of next week. All the drama that went down in Madrid.
Yeah, we will. Definitely 100%. So anyone who's listening, make sure you subscribe to the channel. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, our social accounts are there, but there is also a Linktree link that will take you to all of those social accounts as well in the description of this video. Theo, as always, thank you very much. It's appreciated on a Thursday, which feels like a Friday. You did say at the start it's a Friday feeling, but it does feel like a Friday. So thank you very much for joining. We'll be back, as Theo said, next week with some pre-match Real Madrid Champions League news. Thank you very much for watching.